Good day, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to look at identify business analysis performance improvement as the final task under the business analysis planning and monitoring knowledge area. Now, I often say that the ultimate goal of management organizations is to continue to improve. And the purpose of identify business analysis performance assessment is to help us assess our BA work. I mean, the BA department, the BA units, the BA actors within the organization. How well do they perform their work and where do they need to improve? I want to come up with a plan to improve performance where necessary. Now, the description of this is to monitor and improve our performance. We want to be able to establish the performance. So establishing means that we'll be very clear on the measures that we would use to what? See how well we are performing. So we need performance measures. We need to also be able to conduct analysis of the performance. And then we need to also be able to report on the results, whether it's favorable or unfavorable of our analysis, the results of our analysis. And then we also need to identify any corrective change, whether any type of change we need to make to how we perform business analysis work, be it preventive, be it corrective, or be it developmental. Now, these four things we have: establishing measures, conducting analysis, reporting on analysis, and what carrying out what improvement actions. These are the fundamentals that you will find in the elements. When we come to the elements, right now, performance analysis should occur throughout an initiative, meaning that as we carry out an initiative, we want to continue to evaluate and try to improve our performance. Once a potential improvement is identified, then they become guidelines for the next task, for the next time the task is being executed. We want to make sure that we don't lose track of the improvements that we have identified. Now, another very important thing is, okay, so we've identified description. So let's update this to include description, and we are on to inputs. Description. As we move on to inputs. Now, what are the inputs into the performance improvement? Well, the inputs into this is, of course, we need our BA approach. Remember that our BA approach will identify how business deliverables will be produced and the activities that will perform to be able to get those deliverables, right? When they will be performed and who will perform them and the techniques that will be used. So these key areas are areas where you will find opportunities for improvement, deliverables to be produced, activities needed to be performed, who and when they should be performed, the techniques they should use will give us what? Opportunities can be sources of what? Improvement opportunities. And then we're improving against performance objectives. So we want to know the desired performance outcomes that we want to achieve in terms of what the organization are there. Is there an improvement objective that we want to achieve in business analysis? Very important that we clarify all of that. Now let's look at elements. Now our first element will be that we would what? Conduct performance analysis. The only way we can be able to tell elements. Now, the only way we can be able to tell that we are making improvements or that we have areas where improvement should be made is by conducting performance analysis, right? So yes, we should be very clear on what constitutes effective business work, at least in the context of the initiative or the organization that is performing business analysis activities. We need to be able to have reports on what business analysis performance, and they can be formal or informal. They can be written or verbal. They can be, they can follow a very formal process, right? Now, what's important is that the business analysis performance reports are designed and tailored to be able to meet the need of the people who will use this information, the report, the performance analysis report for decision making, right? Another thing is we have what? Assessment measures. You see, before we can be able to perform improvements, before we can be able to perform improvement activities, we need to know the key areas where improvement should happen, which will be the parameters where we expect to see improvements, and also the scores, the numbers, the targets for these parameters, right? So if we have already existing current measures, then the BA can be able to leverage them, sometimes might be expected to determine or derive new measures. The business analyst should be able to what elicit assessment measures from stakeholders. And this would simply mean going to stakeholders and asking, okay, when it comes to effective, how what kind of performance would you expect to see for you to say that business analysis work in this organization is effective, efficient, and is happening or operating the way it should? And a lot of times stakeholders will be able to point out, okay, we could do better in terms of timeliness, we could do better in terms of what speaking or considering what opinions from various stakeholders. Now, performance measures may be based on deliverables, due dates as specified in the business analysis plan. So if the deliverables are presented as at the due date, then that can be the performance measures. We could also have metrics such as the frequency of changes to business analysis product, the number of review cycle required to get an approval, the efficiency of a task, qualitative feedback from stakeholders concerning how the quality and of business analysis deliverables, right? So these are all, again, there is no limits to performance measures, the kind of performance measures you can have. It will be up to the existing organizational standards and the stakeholders to be able to intervene and provide the BA with areas where improvement is needed. Appropriate performance measures will enable the business analyst to determine when problems are occurring that may affect the performance of business analysis or identify opportunities for improvement. Measures that we can use can be qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative measures are subjective. How did you find the business analysis work? It was fantastic. It was wonderful. I like the way the business analyst interacted with us. I think I can trust the BA. That's qualitative, right? And qualitative can be influenced by stakeholders' attitude, perception, and other subjective criteria. But on the other hand, it could also be quantitative. In quantitative, we're using numerical data like what the amount of time we had to review business analysis deliverables before they were approved. Of course, three reviews to an approval is better performance than 15 reviews before an approval. Has three reviews allows us to be able to efficiently approve as opposed to 15, which will be 5 times 3, right? And then again, what are some other measures? Again, like I said, that there is no limits to measures. The measures will just depend on the context of the business analysis work, the organization, and the stakeholders. Some of the things you might want to measure for accuracy and completeness to be able to determine whether the business analyst work products were correct, relevant when delivered, or whether ongoing revisions are needed to gain acceptance by stakeholders, right? Again, we can assess knowledge. We want to assess whether the business analyst had the skill and experience to perform the assigned task. Effectiveness. Assess whether the business analyst's work products were easy to use as a standalone deliverable or whether they required extensive explanation in order to be understood. We could assess organizational support. Were adequate resources available to complete the business analysis activities when needed? Significance. We could also consider the benefits obtained from the work product and assess whether the cost, time, and resources expended were justified. Were they worth the effort? Did they deliver the required value? Strategic. We want to look at whether the business objectives, were met, whether the problem was solved, whether improvements were achieved, whether our strategic objectives were moved forward. And then, of course, we have timeliness. Evaluate whether the business analyst delivered the work on time as per stakeholder expectations and schedule. Now, the next thing we want to do is to analyze results as the element. Of course, the business analysis, the simply collecting assessment measures and performing analysis, right? Collecting assessment measures will not give us answers. What they do is that they give us inputs into an analytic process, right? So yes, the BA process and deliverables will be compared against what? Set measures. There will be targets that we're expected to achieve. And if we do not achieve those targets that have been set, those defined measures, those goals and objectives, then what we need to do is to improve so that we can be able to meet expectations. The analysis may be performed on the business analysis process, the resources involved, and the deliverables, right? Now, performance will be determined from the point of view of the stakeholders who received and used the business analysis work. Other times, an HRO manager, a personnel manager, Center of Excellence may make this determination and provide assessment. And all stakeholders that have input in assessing the value of the business analysis work, all stakeholders may have, input in assessing the value or the contribution of the business analysis work. But from organization to organization, we may differ on who has authority to set targets against which we will measure the BA's performance. So again, this is saying differ to the organization. Everybody may use and derive some sort of value from the business analysis work, but most organizations will have certain body, certain standardized way of setting the performance KPIs or the performance measures or targets or standards that business analysis work, the business analysis resources, the business analysis processes and deliverables are expected to meet. And then ultimately, we want to recommend actions for improvement. But once the analysis of BA results is complete, then the business analyst would engage stakeholders to be able to determine how to prevent probability of how to perform the following actions will be preventive, corrective, and improvement actions. Now, preventive actions will reduce the probability of an event with negative impact. So, yes, if something is likely to happen in the future that will put us in a bad situation, we can prevent it. There are also corrective actions. How do we reduce negative impact? Assuming an event has already happened and it's negative, how do we correct? How do we steer the organization the right way? And then improvement. How do we increase the probability and the impact that situations or events with positive impacts will happen? Now, these actions will result in changes to the business analysis approach, repeatable process, and tools. Again, remember that our goal is to upgrade and continue to improve. For guidelines and tools, we have, of course, the organizational performance standards. The organization will have standards that are recommended. The organization will have standards that are recommended or expected for business analysts and BA work, right? So guidelines and tools, for guidelines and tools, we want to always refer to these KPIs, these standards, right? And they will often include what performance metrics or expectation for business analysis work when mandated by the organization. These are going to what provide guidance. Let us know when we are performing well. Let us know when we need to improve our performance. And then for the techniques, we use brainstorming to be able to generate ideas for improvement. We use interviews to be able to gather assessment of how well our BA work is performing. We use item tracking to be able to track issues that happen during the performance of business analysis tasks, and we will need to resolve them, of course. Lessons learned, we use it to be able to identify and recommend changes to business analysis, processes, deliverables, templates, tools, and other process assets, right? We can incorporate lessons learned into our current work or use them in future work. We need KPIs, of course, right? We use them to be able to determine what metrics, what indicators are important for assessing BA performance and how do we track record and maintain these KPIs. And then, of course, we have observation. We want to be able to witness business analysis performance, whether there have been improvements. And then again, we have process analysis to be able to analyze existing BA processes so that we can be able to see opportunities for improvement. And this brings us to techniques, right? Continuing with techniques, we have process modeling to be able to identify. So let me just record techniques because this is where we have been to be able to what define and analyze what to define business analysis processes and understand how to improve these processes to be able to reduce problems during hands-off, improve cycle time, and alter business analysis work to support improvements in our downstream processes. We use reviews to be able to identify changes to business analysis processes and deliverables that should be incorporated into future work. A lot of time reviews will happen with what expert reviewers or stakeholders that can be able to identify areas where we need to make changes to BA processes and deliverables. And then we have risk analysis and management. We want to understand the conditions or events that can often negatively impact our business analysis performance. Again, the whole idea of risk management is to identify and mitigate negative potential conditions that can impact performance. Sometimes mitigation works, sometimes avoidance of these conditions would be preferable. And then again, we have root cause analysis to be able to identify underlying cause. Are there causes of failure or difficulty in performing or accomplishing business analysis tasks or goals, right? We want to be able to use root cause analysis to trace sources of failure, sources of difficulties that keep us from achieving our goals. We use surveys and questionnaires to gather feedback from stakeholders about their level of satisfaction with business analysis activities and deliverables. And then we use workshop to gather assessment of performance. So performance assessments can be gathered in a collaborative way using workshop. How well did the BA work from? How well did the BA and the team perform business analysis work? Okay, fantastic. What are the opportunities we have been able to discover for improvement? We use workshop to be able to achieve this in collaboration. Now, the stakeholders for reviewing and helping the BA improve their performance will be the domain subject matter experts, right? So let's put our stakeholders. Then after that, we'll have outputs, right? Now, for stakeholders, we have things like domain subject matter experts, where the domain subject matter experts will help us to inform about the business analysis activities in order to set expectation concerning the BA's involvement in the work and provide feedback concerning where they can improve their approach. We have project manager. The project manager is accountable for the success of the project and should be informed of the current status of BA work. How well is the BA work performing and how does it affect our projects? If potential problems, opportunities for improvement are identified, then the project manager should be consulted before we implement these changes so that they would not disrupt the project processes, right? We want to be able to assess whether these changes will have an impact on the project, right? The project manager may also deliver reports on business analysis effectiveness, how well they perform to the sponsor and other stakeholders, thereby providing feedback for change and continuous improvement. And then the sponsor would often require reports on business analysis performance so that they will be able to see where they can address problems that are identified. A manager of business analysis may also sponsor initiatives to be able to improve the performance of business analysis. So the sponsor may even sponsor initiatives like training, like improvements, like continuous improvement, like bringing in consultants to be able to improve the performance of BA activities within the organization. So these are the key stakeholders. And then we move on to the final, which is output. The output is going to be our business analysis performance assessment. We would have an understanding of our planned performance so that we can compare it against our actual performance, right? A report that will give us a comparison of planned performance and compare it against actual performance. Not only do we compare if there is a variance, we should be able to identify the root cause, right, of the variance. What are the factors that brought about differences in actual results from our expectations? And then it will also propose approaches on how to address the issues, whether through prevention, whether through correction, or whether we would use general improvement techniques. And we will also consider every other finding so that we can understand how well we are performing in business analysis. The goal of this, don't forget, is continuous improvement, continuous performance improvement by what? Comparing what we achieve against what we plan to achieve, picking out the root cause of the variance, and proposing approaches to be able to deal with these issues. These issues can be, we can identify how the actions we can take can be preventive, can be corrective, or improvement actions. And hopefully that this will help to be able to improve the performance of business analysis within the organization. And this brings us to the end of this video where we will identify opportunities for what business analysis performance, right? Want to be able to assess business analysis performance for continuous improvement. And this is the end. Thank you very much for being here with us. When we return, we're going to look at the second knowledge area. We're moving away from task now into the knowledge area known as elicitation and collaboration, where we meet with stakeholders, where we investigate the nature of the need, and where we attempt to understand the kind of solution that will be required to be able to fix the organization or the business needs and requirements. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.